The sound of sneakers squeaking against the polished gym floor echoed through the massive sports complex. The air was thick with anticipation, filled with the rhythmic thuds of basketballs bouncing in rapid succession. Among the hopeful young athletes stood Jordan Hayes, a tall, lean 10-year-old with an intense focus in his eyes. His fingers gripped the rough surface of the ball like it was an extension of himself. This was it. The tryouts for the most prestigious youth basketball team in all of Chicago. For as long as he could remember, Jordan had dreamed of this moment. He had spent countless hours shooting hoops in the driveway of his family's modest home, braving the blistering summer heat and the biting winter cold, pushing himself to perfect every dribble, every crossover, every shot. And now, his time had come to prove himself. The coach, a burly man with a whistle hanging loosely around his neck, clapped his hands to get the boys' attention. "All right, let's see what you've got," he called out, his deep voice cutting through the noise. Jordan's heart pounded, but not with fear. This was excitement. He took off across the court as soon as the drill began, his movement smooth, effortless. He weaved through the other players with the grace of someone who had been doing this all his life. His feet were light, his hands fast. When he reached the basket, he launched himself into the air, releasing the ball with perfect precision. It sailed through the air in a clean arc before swishing through the net. A flicker of satisfaction lit up in his chest, but he didn't let himself get distracted. There was still so much to prove. As he jogged back to his place in line, he caught the coach's eye. The man gave a small nod, and a thrill of hope shot through Jordan. Maybe, just maybe, this was his moment. With each passing drill, Jordan put everything he had into showing his skills. He was quick on his feet, sharp in his decisions. He read the game like a seasoned player, finding open teammates with ease and making pinpoint passes. His defense was relentless, his shots consistent. He played with heart, with a fire that couldn't be ignored. And yet, something felt off. During a water break, Jordan glanced toward the sidelines. The scouts, most of them middle-aged white men in polo shirts, were huddled together, their clipboards covered in scribbled notes. But their eyes weren't on him. They were fixated on the taller, fair-haired kids, watching their every move, nodding with approval even when they made mistakes. Jordan frowned. He had just executed a perfect fast break, but none of them had written anything down. A few minutes later, he saw a boy fumble the ball, nearly tripping over his own feet. One of the scouts leaned in to whisper something to the coach, who chuckled and nodded. Confusion tightened in Jordan's chest. He had outperformed nearly everyone here, so why did it feel like he was invisible? But he didn't have time to dwell on it. The whistle blew, signaling the next phase of tryouts. Jordan steeled himself, determined to let his game speak for itself. He played harder than ever, pouring every ounce of his being into the scrimmage. He stole the ball with lightning reflexes, executed crisp passes, and sank shot after shot. His teammates started feeding him the ball instinctively, recognizing his ability to control the court. Still, the eyes of the scouts barely flickered in his direction. By the time the tryout ended, Jordan was drenched in sweat, his muscles aching from exertion. He stood among the other players as the coach and scouts huddled together, whispering amongst themselves. His heart pounded in his ears as he waited, his hands clenched into fists. The coach stepped forward, clearing his throat. "All right, boys," he announced. "If I call your name, step forward. You've made the team." One by one, names were called. With each name that wasn't his, Jordan felt his stomach tighten. The group of unchosen players dwindled around him. And finally, Daniel Lawson. Jordan's breath caught in his throat as a lanky, fair-haired boy stepped forward, grinning ear to ear. He had barely made a basketball tryout, had tripped over his own feet more than once, yet here he was, standing proudly among the chosen. Jordan's fingers curled tighter around the basketball in his hands. Every single player who had been selected was white. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been shut out, not because he wasn't good enough, but because of something he couldn't change. He trudged out of the gym, the weight of disappointment pressing down on him. The city lights flickered above as he made his way home, his sneakers scuffing against the cracked pavement. When he turned the corner onto his street, he saw his parents waiting for him on the porch. "Hey, champ," his dad called, his voice filled with quiet encouragement. "How'd it go?" Jordan opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. "I want to go where I can grow the most," Jaden said thoughtfully. "Somewhere that will challenge me." After weeks of consideration, he made his choice. On national television, in front of cameras and reporters, he picked up a college hat and placed it on his head. "I'm committing to Duke University," the crowd erupted. From an overlooked kid at Tryouts to a national sensation, Jaden's journey was proof that talent, hard work, and resilience could overcome anything. But as he stood there shaking hands, smiling for pictures, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of something even bigger. The announcement of Jaden's commitment to Duke University marked a turning point in his life. The congratulations poured in from everywhere. His social media exploded with messages from fans, former teammates, and even players he had once looked up to. The news spread like wildfire. Jaden Hayes, the kid who had once been overlooked at a tryout, was now headed to one of the most prestigious college basketball programs in the country. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Reporters wanted interviews, sponsors reached out, and college fans debated online about how Jaden would fit into Duke's system. But through all the noise, Jaden stayed focused. He still woke up before sunrise to train, still spent late nights in the gym perfecting his game. Fame wasn't his goal. Getting better was. Coach Williams called him one evening, just as Jaden was finishing a solo workout. "How does it feel, kid?" the coach asked, his voice filled with pride. Jaden wiped sweat from his forehead. "Like I've still got work to do." Coach Williams chuckled. "That's what I like to hear." There was a pause. "Duke didn't pick you because you're just another talented player. They picked you because you're a leader. Keep showing them that." Jaden nodded, gripping the phone tighter. "I will, coach." His last summer before college was spent pushing himself harder than ever. He trained with former Duke alumni, some of whom were now in the NBA. The intensity was unlike anything he had experienced before. Every drill was faster, every scrimmage more physical. There were days when his body ached so badly he could barely move. But he never stopped. The night before he left for Duke, his parents took him out for dinner at his favorite spot in town. The restaurant buzzed with conversation, but Jaden could tell his mother was unusually quiet. She finally spoke, her voice soft. "It feels like just yesterday you were that little boy practicing in the driveway." Jaden smiled. "Still feels like that sometimes." His father leaned forward. "This is your next step, son. But remember, no matter how big you get, stay grounded, stay humble." Jaden nodded. "Always." The next morning, as he packed his bags, he took one last look at his childhood bedroom. The trophies lined the shelves. The basketball posters covered the walls. He ran his fingers over the worn leather of the ball sitting on his desk, the same one he had practiced with for years. This was it. A new chapter was beginning. The moment Jaden stepped onto Duke's campus, he felt it. The weight of history, the pressure of expectations. The program had produced some of the greatest players in basketball history, and now he was part of that legacy. His first college practice was brutal. The speed of the game was on another level. His new teammates were bigger, stronger, and just as hungry as he was. Every possession was a battle. The upperclassmen didn't take it easy on him. During a full-court scrimmage, Jaden drove into the lane, confident he had a clear path to the basket. But before he could release his shot, a towering senior center swatted the ball out of bounds with a force that sent it flying into the stands. Laughter echoed through the gym. "Welcome to college ball, freshman," one of the veterans called out. Jaden gritted his teeth but said nothing. He had been here before. He spent every spare moment studying the game, watching film, analyzing his mistakes. He worked closely with the coaching staff, fine-tuning his decision-making and adjusting to the speed of college basketball. Little by little, he improved. By the time Duke's first game arrived, Jaden wasn't just another freshman. He was a key player. When coach called his name to check into the game, his heart pounded, but he masked his nerves with confidence. His first possession, he caught the ball at the top of the key, faked right, then drove left, finishing with a smooth floater over the outstretched arms of a defender. The crowd roared. Moments later, he stole a pass, sprinted down the court, and threw a perfect alley-oop to a teammate for a thunderous dunk. The momentum shifted instantly. From that moment on, Jaden wasn't just playing, he was making an impact. As the season progressed, he continued to rise. He had breakout performances, clutch moments, and highlight reel plays that had commentators raving about his potential. NBA scouts began attending games, whispers of his draft stock growing louder. But with success came pressure. One night, after a particularly tough loss, Jaden sat alone in the empty gym, staring at the hardwood floor. He had missed a crucial shot in the final seconds. The media had questioned his ability to perform under pressure. Coach Adams, Duke's head coach, found him there dribbling idly. "You know," the coach said, sitting beside him, "every great player has moments like this." Jaden exhaled sharply. "I should have made that shot." Coach Adams nodded. "Maybe. But basketball isn't about never failing. It's about how you respond when you do." Jaden thought back to his journey, the rejection, the setbacks, the hours spent alone on the court, determined to prove himself. He met his coach's eyes and nodded. "I'm not going to let this stop me." The very next game, Jaden bounced back with a career-high performance. The doubts vanished. He was proving, once again, why he belonged. By the time the season ended, Jaden was on every NBA scout's radar. The question was no longer if he would declare for the draft. It was when. As he sat in his dorm room, staring at the papers in front of him, he felt the weight of the decision. Declaring for the draft meant leaving college early, chasing his NBA dream. Staying another year meant continuing to develop, but also risking injury or his stock falling. He called his parents that night. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. His father's voice was calm. "That's not for us to decide, son. It's your journey." His mother added, "Whatever you choose, we'll support you." Jaden exhaled, gripping the phone. He already knew the answer. The next morning, he walked into Coach Adams's office. "I'm ready," he said. "I'm declaring for the NBA draft." The news sent shockwaves through the basketball world. Analysts debated his decision, teams evaluated his potential, and fans speculated where he would land. Months later, he sat in the green room at the NBA draft, dressed in a sharp suit, his family beside him. The energy in the room was electric. This was the moment he had been working for his entire life. The commissioner stepped to the podium, reading the next pick. And with the 10th pick in the NBA draft, the Miami Heat select Jaden Hayes. Time seemed to freeze. His parents grabbed his hands. His mother had tears in her eyes, his father's grip firm with pride. Jaden stood, shaking hands, walking across the stage, slipping on the Heat cap. Cameras flashed. The crowd cheered. The kid who had been ignored at tryouts. The kid who had once questioned if he was good enough. Now, he was an NBA player. As he held up his new jersey for the cameras, he thought back to those long nights on the neighborhood court, to the boy who had once been told he wasn't good enough. He wished he could go back and tell that boy, "You were always good enough. You just had to show them." And now? Now, the whole world knew his name. Jaden Hayes had arrived. And this was just the beginning. His mother's face softened as she stepped forward, wrapping him in a warm hug. That was all it took. His chest tightened, his eyes burned, and the tears spilled over. "Oh, sweetheart," his mom murmured, rubbing his back. "It's okay. Let it out." They guided him inside, settling onto the couch as he finally found his voice. Between sniffles, he told them everything, how he had played his heart out, how he had outshone the other players, how it hadn't mattered in the end. "I don't get it," he said, his voice cracking. What else was I supposed to do? His parents exchanged a look. His dad took a deep breath. Son, he said gently, sometimes in life, things aren't fair. People judge you for things that have nothing to do with your talent or hard work. Jordan swallowed hard, anger simmering beneath his hurt. But that's not right. No, his mom agreed, her voice firm. It's not. But what matters now is what you do next. His father nodded. You can't change how people see you, but you can control how hard you work, how much you believe in yourself. Jordan's fists tightened. So what? I just keep going? Keep working even if no one gives me a shot? His dad placed a hand on his shoulder. Exactly. You make it so that they can't ignore you. Something shifted in Jordan then. The fire that had always burned inside him roared to life, hotter and brighter than ever before. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Jordan was already out on the court. The air was cool, the city still waking up, but he didn't care. He dribbled, he sprinted, he shot basket after basket, each one fueled by the sting of rejection. They might have overlooked him, but he was about to make sure that no one ever did again. Day after day, Jaden returned to the court before the sun had fully risen, his breath visible in the cold morning air. The world was still asleep, but he was wide awake, fueled by something deeper than disappointment. Each bounce of the ball echoed in the quiet dawn, a rhythmic promise to himself. He would not be ignored. His drills became relentless. Dribbling drills, crossover moves, jump shots from every angle imaginable. He ran sprints up and down the court, his lungs burning, his legs screaming in protest. He practiced his footwork with the precision of a dancer, cutting left, cutting right, always pushing his limits. When he missed a shot, he didn't groan or hang his head. He grabbed the ball and tried again. Some days his fingers ached from gripping the ball for so long. Some nights his legs felt like they could barely carry him home. But he never stopped. At first, he was alone. But over time, his dedication began to attract attention. It started with a few kids from the neighborhood stopping by, watching from the sidelines. They saw the way he moved, the way he played like every practice session was a championship game. Word spread. Soon more kids were showing up, not just to watch, but to learn. Yo, Jaden, a boy named Marcus called out one afternoon, dribbling a ball of his own. How do you do that crossover so fast? Jaden, catching his breath, spun the ball on his fingertip. It's all in the wrists, he said. You gotta sell it. Make them think you're going one way, then explode the other. Marcus nodded, trying to mimic the move. He stumbled at first, but Jaden just smiled. Keep at it, he encouraged. It took me months to get it right. More and more kids started coming. They looked up to Jaden, not just for his skills, but for his drive. He wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but he was the hardest worker. Jaden didn't just train himself anymore. He became a leader. And then, one day, something happened that changed everything. A man in a tracksuit stood near the fence, arms crossed, watching Jaden closely. He was tall, built like a former athlete, and carried the presence of someone who knew basketball inside and out. Jaden noticed him immediately, but he didn't break focus. He continued his drills, finishing his set before stopping to catch his breath. The man approached, nodding in approval. You've got talent, kid, he said, and work ethic. That's rare. Jaden wiped sweat from his forehead. Thanks, he said cautiously. You a coach? The man chuckled. Something like that. Name's Coach Reynolds. I work with a few high school programs, scouting young talent. You play for a team? Jaden hesitated. The sting of his last tryout still lingered in his memory. Not yet, he admitted. Coach Reynolds studied him for a long moment. That's a shame, he said, because you've got something special. You just need the right opportunity. Jaden's heart pounded. Was this it? Was this his second chance? I'm running an off-season training camp for promising young players, Coach Reynolds continued. It's invite only and it's competitive as hell, but I think you'd fit right in. Jaden barely processed the words before he nodded. I'll be there, he said firmly. That night, Jaden could barely sleep. He stared at the ceiling, heart racing with excitement. He had been given a shot, a real shot, and this time, he wouldn't let it slip away. The first day of the training camp, Jaden walked into the gym and immediately felt the energy in the air. The players here were different. They were fast, strong, and polished, kids who had been playing on top teams for years. But Jaden wasn't intimidated. He thrived on competition. From the first drill, he went all out. His speed and agility stood out, his ball handling skills unmatched. But more than that, his hunger was obvious. While other players groaned through sprints, Jaden pushed harder. While some complained about extra drills, Jaden welcomed them, and Coach Reynolds noticed. By the end of the first week, Jaden had made a name for himself. His teammates respected him, and the coaches saw his potential. Keep working like this, Coach Reynolds told him after practice one evening, and you're going to go far, kid. Jaden nodded, sweat dripping from his brow. I will. The weeks passed, and Jaden's game reached another level. He developed sharper instincts, quicker reactions. He learned how to anticipate plays, how to command the court like a true leader. Then, one day, Coach Reynolds pulled him aside. There's a high school program that's been watching you, he said. They've got a spot open, and I think you should try out. Jaden's chest tightened. He had been here before. He had faced rejection. But this time, he was different. He was ready. The day of the high school tryout, Jaden stepped onto the court with his head held high. The gym was filled with players hoping to earn a spot, but Jaden didn't let himself get distracted. This was his moment. The coach ran them through a series of grueling drills, speed tests, shooting accuracy, defensive rotations. Jaden attacked each one with precision, refusing to let a single opportunity slip by. When the scrimmage started, Jaden took control. He called out plays, set up teammates, and drained shots with unshakable confidence. And this time, the coaches were watching. By the end of the tryout, Jaden was exhausted but exhilarated. He had left everything on the court. The head coach, a sharp-eyed man named Coach Williams, approached him afterward. You're impressive, Jaden, he said, studying him closely. I've seen a lot of young players, but you've got something different, something you can't teach. Jaden held his breath. We want you on the team. For a moment, Jaden couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, as the words sank in, a slow smile spread across his face. He had done it. After years of grinding, of being overlooked, of pushing through rejection, he had finally earned his place. As he left the gym that day, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. But he knew this was only the beginning. Jaden left the gym that day with his head held high, gripping his worn-out basketball in one hand. The weight of rejection that had once dragged him down had been replaced with something new: determination, hunger, and an unshakable belief in himself. From that moment on, he dedicated every waking hour to becoming the best player he could be. The early morning practices that had once felt lonely now felt like a ritual, a sacred time where he sharpened his skills in silence while the rest of the world slept. At school, people started noticing. Word spread quickly about the kid who had fought his way onto the varsity team through sheer grit and talent. Some were impressed, others skeptical. Let's see if he can actually perform when it matters, one of the older players muttered during practice. Jaden heard it. He stored it away like fuel for the fire burning inside him. When the first official practice of the season began, Jaden didn't hold back. He went head-to-head with the seniors, unafraid of their experience, unwilling to back down. Every drill, every play, he treated it like a championship game. Carried himself, how he never shied away from a challenge, how he absorbed feedback and improved with every rep. All right, Hayes, Coach Williams said after practice, motioning for Jaden to come over. You want to play at this level? You need to be tougher than anyone else on this court. Jaden nodded. I will be, Coach. Good, Coach Williams said, because we're counting on you this season. Jaden's stomach flipped. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but instead of fear, he felt excitement. His first varsity game came faster than he expected. The gym was packed, the air buzzing with energy. Students filled the bleachers, chanting, laughing, waiting for the action to begin. Jaden's parents sat near the front, his father's arms crossed, his mother clasping her hands in her lap, eyes locked onto the court. Jaden paced near the bench, his fingers tapping against his shorts. He was ready. The buzzer sounded and the game was underway. From the start, the opposing team came out aggressive, pressing hard, forcing turnovers. Jaden watched from the bench, taking mental notes. Then, midway through the second quarter, Coach Williams called his name. "Hayes, get in there." Jaden sprang to his feet. His heart pounded, but his expression was calm as he stepped onto the court. The second he got the ball, everything slowed down. He felt the court beneath his feet, the defenders closing in, the hum of the crowd fading into the background. One quick move, then another. He slipped past his man, drove into the lane, and launched a perfect floater. Swish. The crowd erupted. Jaden didn't celebrate. He just turned and jogged back on defense, his face set in determination. From that moment, everything changed. He became a key player, someone his teammates relied on. Game after game, he proved himself. He made clutch plays, locked down defenders, created opportunities for his team. The newspapers started writing about him. Coaches from rival schools took notice. His name began to carry weight. But Jaden wasn't satisfied. Every night after practice, he stayed late, working on his shot. Every morning, he was the first one in the gym. He watched game film, studied the moves of the greats, obsessed over the details. The more he improved, the more people started to believe. His teammates no longer questioned whether he belonged. They knew he did. As the season wore on, Jaden's team kept winning. They fought their way to the top of the rankings, each game bringing them closer to something bigger, a shot at the state championship. Then came the semifinal game. The gym was electric, filled to the brim with fans. This was the biggest game of Jaden's life. From the tip-off, it was clear this wouldn't be easy. The opposing team played rough, their defense suffocating. Jaden took hit after hit, but he never wavered. With a minute left in the fourth quarter, the score was tied. Jaden had the ball. He dribbled up the court, scanning the defense. His teammates spread out, waiting for his move. He faked left, crossed right, and drove into the lane. A defender leaped in front of him. Jaden adjusted midair, twisting his body, releasing a high-arcing shot over outstretched hands. The ball spun through the air. It hit the rim, bounced, then dropped through the net. The gym exploded. Jaden landed, his teammates swarming him, the roar of the crowd vibrating through his bones. The final buzzer sounded. They had won. After the game, Jaden sat in the locker room, still catching his breath. Coach Williams walked in, clapping him on the back. "That," Coach said, "was one hell of a performance." Jaden grinned. "Just doing my job, Coach." Coach Williams chuckled. "You keep playing like this, and scouts are going to come knocking." Jaden's heart skipped a beat. Scouts. College. The future he had dreamed of for so long was finally within reach. But there was still one more game. The state championship. For the next week, Jaden trained harder than ever. He visualized every play, every possible scenario. He pushed himself to exhaustion. Then, the big day arrived. The championship game was unlike anything Jaden had ever experienced. The stadium was massive, the pressure suffocating. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes. But once the game started, Jaden tuned everything out. He played with everything he had. Every shot, every pass, every defensive stop. He left nothing behind. The game went down to the wire. With seconds left, the score was tied. The ball found Jaden's hands. One last shot. He took a deep breath. Then he rose up, the ball leaving his fingertips in perfect rotation. Time slowed. The crowd held its breath. The ball swished through the net. Game over. They had done it. The moment felt surreal as Jaden was lifted onto his teammates' shoulders, the trophy shining under the arena lights. He had started as the kid nobody noticed, the kid who had been overlooked, dismissed. Now he was the name on everyone's lips. The journey had been long, but this was only the beginning. Jaden Hayes had arrived, and the world was finally watching. Jaden stood at the center of the roaring stadium, his heart hammering in his chest as the weight of the moment settled over him. The championship trophy gleamed in the bright overhead lights, reflecting the months, the years of relentless hard work and sacrifice. As his teammates hoisted him onto their shoulders, the sheer magnitude of what he had just accomplished began to sink in. He had done it. They had done it. Against all odds, against every setback, every rejection. Jaden Hayes was now a state champion. His parents rushed onto the court, his mother wiping away proud tears, his father's hand clapping against his back in an embrace that said everything words couldn't. "You earned this, son," his father said, his voice thick with emotion. Jaden nodded, gripping the trophy tightly. "I told you," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "They couldn't ignore me forever." That night, as the celebration carried on, Jaden found himself stepping away from the noise for a moment of quiet. He sat alone in the empty bleachers, the sounds of his teammates and fans cheering still echoing in the background. He stared down at the trophy in his hands, remembering the kid he had been not so long ago, the kid who had walked home from that first tryout with his head hanging low, wondering if he would ever be seen. Now the world was watching. But this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The weeks following the championship win were a whirlwind. Jaden's name was everywhere. Articles praised his leadership on the court, sports analysts dissected his game, and suddenly, college recruiters were calling Coach Williams, asking about the young star who had just led his team to victory. "Coach," Jaden said one afternoon, still catching his breath after an intense practice, "is this really happening?" Coach Williams chuckled. "It's been happening, Jaden. People are finally just catching up to you." Scouts started showing up at his games. College coaches invited him for visits. Letters from some of the top programs in the country began filling his mailbox. Jaden read each one carefully, still unable to fully grasp how far he had come. "Son, this is just the start," his father reminded him. "You have options now. But whatever you choose, make sure it's right for you." Jaden nodded. He wasn't going to rush this decision. Meanwhile, his training didn't stop. If anything, he pushed himself harder. He knew the road ahead would be even tougher. College ball was a different level, and he refused to let the attention get to his head. He kept showing up at the gym before dawn. He watched game film late into the night, analyzing the best players in the game, figuring out how to sharpen his own weaknesses. And just when it seemed like everything was lining up perfectly, an unexpected challenge emerged. One afternoon, as Jaden was packing up his bag after practice, Coach Williams called him into his office. "Jaden, sit down," he said, his expression unusually serious. Jaden's stomach clenched. He could tell something was wrong. Coach Williams sighed, folding his hands on the desk. "There's a rumor going around that some recruiters are hesitant about you." Jaden blinked. "Hesitant? What do you mean?" Coach leaned forward. "They're saying you had to work twice as hard just to get noticed. Some of them are wondering if that means you don't have natural talent, if you're more effort than ability." Jaden's jaw clenched. "That's ridiculous," he said through gritted teeth. "It is," Coach Williams agreed. "But this is the reality, Jaden. Sometimes people will look for reasons to doubt you no matter what you do." Jaden exhaled sharply, his pulse pounding in frustration. Coach Williams's voice softened. "But listen to me. You've been proving people wrong your entire life. This is just another obstacle, and you know exactly how to handle obstacles." Jaden nodded slowly. He did know. That night, he trained harder than ever. He let every doubt, every unfair judgment fuel him. He wasn't just going to prove them wrong. He was going to make them regret ever doubting him in the first place. By the end of the season, the recruitment process had reached its peak. Jaden received offers from several Division I schools, each one eager to have him join their program. He visited campuses, met coaches, listened to their pitches. And then, after months of careful consideration, he made his decision. On the day of his commitment announcement, the gym was packed. His teammates, classmates, teachers, all had gathered to see where Jaden Hayes was heading next. A long table was set up in front of the crowd, several college hats placed neatly on top. Jaden sat in the middle, microphone in front of him, cameras flashing from every angle. He took a deep breath. "This journey started a long time ago," he said, his voice steady. "I've worked for this moment every single day. I've had setbacks, I've been overlooked, but I never let that stop me. Because I knew that if I kept working, kept believing, this day would come." He reached forward, his fingers brushing over the hats. Then, he picked one up, slipping it onto his head. The crowd erupted. Jaden had committed to one of the top programs in the country. As he sat there surrounded by applause, he thought about the boy who had walked out of that first failed tryout, feeling invisible. He wished he could go back and tell that boy something. Tell him that it was all worth it. Tell him that no matter how many doors were closed in his face, he was always going to find a way to break through. But most of all, he would tell him to never, ever stop believing in himself. Because now, there was no doubt. Jaden Hayes had arrived. And this was only the beginning. The moment Jaden placed that college hat on his head, the gym erupted into cheers, but inside he felt something deeper than excitement, relief. He had done it. The years of sacrifice, the countless early mornings, the relentless grind, all of it had led to this. His mother wiped away a tear. His father clapped proudly, and Coach Williams gave him a firm nod of approval. His teammates surrounded him, patting him on the back, shaking his shoulders in celebration. But through all the noise, all the flashing cameras, one thought rang clear in his mind. This is only the beginning. The months leading up to his college debut flew by. Jaden doubled down on his training, knowing that stepping onto a Division I court meant competing against some of the best young players in the country. High school had been tough, but this was another level entirely. From the moment he arrived on campus, reality hit him hard. The first practice was brutal. The speed of the game was faster than anything he had ever experienced. The players were bigger, stronger, more polished. Even the way they ran drills was different, more intense, more demanding. Jaden was used to being the best player on the court. Here, he was just another freshman trying to prove he belonged. The upperclassmen weren't easy on him. During one scrimmage, he drove into the lane, ready to sink a floater, only to have a senior center swat the ball out of bounds so hard it nearly hit the wall. The older players laughed, shaking their heads. "Welcome to college ball, Rook," one of them chuckled. Jaden gritted his teeth but said nothing. He had been here before. Underestimated. Doubted. He knew exactly what to do. Every night, after the official team practice ended, Jaden stayed behind. While his teammates hit the showers, he worked on his shot. When they went back to their dorms, he ran sprints. When they relaxed, he watched film, studying the tendencies of his new teammates, learning their strengths and weaknesses. Little by little, he adjusted. He learned how to anticipate faster, how to move more efficiently. He hit the weight room, pushing his body harder than ever. His confidence started to return. Then, one day during practice, something clicked. It was an intra-squad scrimmage. The team's starting point guard had the ball, dribbling up court. Jaden locked in, his body moving on instinct. As soon as the guard hesitated for a split second, Jaden struck. His hand shot out, picking the ball clean. Without thinking, he sprinted down the court, a defender closing in behind him. He took off. Time seemed to slow as he soared through the air, slamming the ball through the hoop with an intensity that sent a shockwave through the gym. The court fell silent for half a second. Then, the entire bench exploded in cheers. Even the senior who had blocked him weeks ago let out an impressed whistle. Coach Adams, the head coach, blew his whistle, signaling for everyone to gather around. He pointed straight at Jaden. "That," he said, his voice booming, is how you make a statement. Jaden's chest swelled with pride. He wasn't just here to participate. He was here to take over. As the season neared, the question remained. Would Jaden get real playing time as a freshman? Most first-year players rode the bench waiting for their chance, but Jaden had never been the type to wait for opportunities. He made them. When the first game arrived, the stadium was packed, the energy electric. The starting lineup was announced, and as expected, Jaden's name wasn't called. He bounced on the balls of his feet, waiting, watching, learning. Then, midway through the second quarter, Coach Adams turned toward the bench. "Jaden, you're in!" His heart pounded as he peeled off his warm-up and jogged onto the court. The crowd blurred. The noise faded. All that mattered was the game. The moment he touched the ball, instincts took over. He drove past his defender, hit a smooth pull-up jumper, then sprinted back on defense before the opposing team could react. Minutes later, he caught a pass on the fast break, and without hesitation, threw a perfect alley-oop to a teammate for an easy dunk. The crowd roared. His teammates chest-bumped him. Jaden was making an impact. As the season progressed, his role grew. He became the team's spark plug, the player who brought energy, who changed the tempo, who made things happen when they needed it most. And just like that, the scouts started talking again. "He's not just hard-working," one commentator said during a televised game. "This kid has real talent." By the end of the season, Jaden had solidified himself as a future star. He had started as an overlooked freshman. Now he was on NBA draft watch lists, but he wasn't satisfied. He stayed on campus all summer, training harder than ever. He pushed himself to exhaustion, knowing that his sophomore year would be crucial. When the season finally rolled around again, Jaden didn't just play. He dominated. He led his team in scoring. He set records. He hit game winners. The media took notice. Analysts debated his draft stock. His face appeared on sports magazine covers. And then came the question everyone had been waiting for. Would Jaden declare for the NBA draft? His coaches told him he was ready. His teammates encouraged him. His parents reminded him that whatever he chose, they would support him. One night, Jaden sat in his dorm room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had brought him here. The rejection, the early mornings, the nights spent alone on the court, grinding when no one was watching. He had come too far to stop now. The next day, he called a press conference. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as he took a seat at the front. Jaden took a deep breath, gripping the microphone. "This journey started when I was just a kid with a dream," he said. "I've faced obstacles. I've been doubted, but I've never stopped working. And now I'm ready to take the next step." The room fell silent in anticipation. Jaden smiled. "I'm declaring for the NBA draft." The room exploded in cheers, reporters scrambling to ask questions. Jaden sat back, letting the moment wash over him. This was it. The dream he had chased for so long was finally within reach. A few months later, he was sitting at the NBA draft, dressed in a sharp suit, his family by his side. The commissioner stepped up to the podium holding the next draft card. And with the 10th pick in the NBA draft, the Miami Heat select Jaden Hayes. Jaden's body went numb. The crowd erupted. His parents embraced him, tears in their eyes. He stood, shaking hands, walking across the stage, slipping on the team cap. Cameras flashed. The kid who had been ignored at tryouts. The kid who had been overlooked, doubted, dismissed. Now, he was an NBA player. As he held up his new jersey for the cameras, he thought back to the long, lonely hours on that neighborhood court. To the boy who had once wondered if he would ever be good enough. He wished he could go back and tell that boy, "You were always good enough. You just had to show them." And now? Now the whole world knew his name. Jaden Hayes had arrived, and this was just the beginning. Every day after school, long after his teammates had left the gym, Jaden remained. The bouncing of the ball echoed through the empty space, the swish of the net breaking the silence as he shot over and over again. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Each shot was a reminder of why he was here, why he had worked so hard to reach this point. Coach Williams had noticed Jaden's dedication early on. The way the boy moved with quiet intensity, the way he stayed after practice, perfecting every detail of his game. One evening, as the rest of the team packed up their bags, Coach Williams approached him. "You're putting in the extra work, I see," the coach said, bouncing a ball in his hands. Jaden nodded, catching his breath. "I have to. The tournament's coming up and I need to be better." Coach Williams studied him for a moment before offering a small smile. "How about I stay late with you? We can fine-tune some things." Jaden's eyes lit up. "Really?" Coach Williams chuckled. "Of course. Hard work deserves guidance. Let's see if we can sharpen that jumper of yours." From that day on, their training sessions became legendary. The gym lights stayed on long after dark as Jaden and Coach Williams worked on advanced techniques, strategies, and mental toughness. Jaden absorbed everything like a sponge, eager to push his limits. But he wasn't the only one inspired. His teammates began to take notice. At first, it was just a few of them, staying an extra 10 or 15 minutes. Then, gradually, more players stuck around, running drills, working on footwork, pushing each other to new heights. Before long, the gym was alive with movement long past scheduled practices. The team had transformed into something greater than individual players. They had become a unit, bonded by their shared drive for excellence. As the tournament drew closer, the excitement in the school was undeniable. Hallways were decorated with banners, students wore school colors with pride, and whispers of championship dreams filled every classroom. Jaden felt the weight of expectation, but instead of being overwhelmed, he thrived on it. The night before their first tournament game, Jaden stood in the locker room, surrounded by his teammates. He took a deep breath, meeting each of their gazes. "We've worked too hard to back down now," he said, his voice steady. "We're not just playing for ourselves. We're playing for this school, for everyone who believes in us. No matter what happens out there, we fight until the final buzzer." A chorus of agreement filled the air. The team was ready. The tournament began with a surge of adrenaline. The gym was packed, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. As soon as the whistle blew, Jaden locked in. From the first possession, it was clear Jaden was on another level. He moved effortlessly, his footwork crisp, his passes precise. He weaved through defenders like they were standing still, creating space for himself and his teammates. Shot after shot found the net, the sound of swishes sending waves of excitement through the crowd. With every game, Jaden pushed his limits. He wasn't just scoring. He was orchestrating, controlling the pace, leading his team like a seasoned professional. His teammates responded in kind, their confidence growing with each victory. Word spread fast. Fans, scouts, and reporters all took notice of the young star tearing through the competition. Even opposing teams, desperate to contain him, designed their entire defensive strategies around stopping Jaden. But he was unstoppable. When double-teamed, he found open teammates. When defenders crowded him, he adapted. No matter what they threw at him, Jaden stayed one step ahead. The semifinal game was a war. The opposing team was just as determined, matching Jaden's squad point for point. The gym was electric, the tension thick as the game came down to the final minutes. With the score tied, Jaden wiped sweat from his brow. He glanced at the scoreboard, then at his teammates. They were exhausted, but their eyes burned with determination. "We've got this," he told them. "Play smart, play together." Then, in a moment of brilliance, Jaden anticipated a pass, intercepting the ball with lightning-fast reflexes. He sprinted down the court, defenders on his heels. Just as they expected him to take the shot, he delivered a perfect no-look pass to his teammate in the corner. The shot was pure. Swish. The crowd erupted. On the next play, Jaden made a crucial block, denying the other team a shot. And as the final seconds ticked down, he was fouled, stepping up to the free throw line. The gym fell silent. Jaden bounced the ball once, twice. Then, with steady hands, he sank both shots. The buzzer sounded. Victory. His teammates surrounded him, lifting him onto their shoulders as the crowd roared. They had done it. They were going to the championship. The excitement in the school reached a fever pitch. Jaden couldn't walk through the hallways without being stopped by classmates, teachers, even younger students who looked up to him. But Jaden didn't let the attention distract him. He poured every ounce of energy into preparing for the final game. Early mornings, late nights, extra film sessions, he was determined to bring home the championship trophy. The day of the final arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. As Jaden stepped onto the court, he felt the magnitude of the moment. This was what he had worked for. The game was a battle from the opening tip. Every possession was hard-fought, every point earned. The opposing team was relentless, throwing everything they had at Jaden. But he thrived under pressure. He sank three-pointers with precision. He created plays out of nothing. Even when double-teamed, he remained composed, finding open teammates and keeping the offense flowing. The game came down to the wire. With the score tied and seconds left, Jaden had the ball. He dribbled, scanning the defense. The crowd held its breath. Then, with the calm of a veteran, he made his move. A quick crossover, a step-back jumper. The ball soared through the air, spinning toward the rim. The buzzer sounded. Swish. For a moment, silence. Then, the gym exploded in celebration. Jaden's teammates tackled him in joy. The championship was theirs. As he stood on the podium, accepting the MVP trophy, Jaden's mind raced back to where it all started. The rejection, the long nights in the gym, the doubts. And now, here he was, proving to the world what he had always known deep down. He was meant for this. The crowd chanted his name as he held the trophy high, but even as the confetti rained down, Jaden knew. This was only the beginning. The celebration stretched long into the night. Jaden's teammates, coaches, and classmates flooded the court, shouting, laughing, and embracing one another in pure joy. The regional championship trophy gleamed under the bright gym lights, held high above their heads like a beacon of everything they had worked for. Jaden stood at the center of it all, barely able to process what had just happened. Just a few years ago, he had been that kid, ignored, overlooked, doubted. Now, he was the MVP, the leader of a championship team, and the entire school was chanting his name. "Jaden, Jaden, Jaden!" His parents fought through the crowd, and the moment he saw them, all the emotions he had held back came rushing forward. His mother pulled him into a tight embrace, her tears soaking into his jersey. "We are so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. His father clapped him on the back, pride shining in his eyes. "You did it, son. You proved them all wrong." Jaden smiled, his grip tightening on the MVP trophy in his hands. "This isn't just for me," he said, looking around at his teammates. "We did this together." Coach Williams, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally stepped forward. He didn't say much, but the way he pulled Jaden into a hug spoke volumes. "You earned this," Coach said quietly. "Every bit of it." As the celebrations continued, Jaden found himself pulled in a dozen different directions. Friends wanting pictures, reporters asking for quotes, younger players looking at him with wide, admiring eyes. He shook hands, laughed, and let himself enjoy the moment. But deep inside, he knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The following days were a blur. The championship win had turned Jaden into a local celebrity. Newspapers featured him on the front page, highlighting his journey from an overlooked kid to the most valuable player in the region. The school's social media pages exploded with posts, clips of his game-winning shots spreading across the internet. Even national sports outlets started taking notice. Analysts discussed his skill set, former players praised his leadership, and suddenly scouts were calling Coach Williams, asking about the young phenom who had dominated the tournament. But Jaden didn't let the attention distract him. Every morning he was still in the gym before school. Every evening he stayed late, putting up extra shots, working on his footwork, refining his game. "You're not slowing down?" Marcus asked one afternoon as Jaden wiped sweat from his forehead. Jaden chuckled, shaking his head. "Nah, man. If anything, I need to work harder." Marcus grinned. "You're crazy, bro." "Maybe," Jaden admitted. "But I've got bigger goals now." Because while the championship had been incredible, Jaden knew he wasn't done proving himself. One evening, just as Jaden was finishing up an intense training session, his phone buzzed. It was Coach Williams. "Jaden, you need to come to my office," Coach said, excitement evident in his voice. Curious, Jaden grabbed his bag and jogged across campus to the coach's office. When he stepped inside, Coach Williams was sitting at his desk, a thick envelope in front of him. "What's going on, Coach?" Jaden asked. Coach Williams grinned and slid the envelope across the desk. "Open it." Jaden hesitated before tearing it open. His eyes scanned the letter inside. As he read, his heart pounded. An invitation. To the All-American High School Basketball Showcase. Jaden's mouth went dry. This was it. The biggest stage for high school players. The place where future NBA stars made their names. "This," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is huge." Coach Williams leaned back, a proud smile on his face. "I told you, kid. Keep working, and they won't be able to ignore you." Jaden exhaled sharply, the weight of the moment sinking in. This wasn't just another game. This was his chance to show the entire country what he was capable of. The weeks leading up to the All-American Showcase were grueling. Jaden pushed himself harder than ever before, training with an intensity that surprised even Coach Williams. "This isn't just a regular game," Jaden told his parents one evening as he packed his bag. "This is my shot." His mother touched his arm, giving him a reassuring smile. "No matter what happens, we're proud of you." Jaden nodded. He appreciated their support, but in his mind, failure wasn't an option. The day of the showcase arrived, and Jaden stepped into the massive arena, his breath catching in his throat. The gym was packed with scouts, coaches, media personalities, everyone who mattered in the basketball world. The pressure was suffocating. But Jaden thrived under pressure. From the moment the game tipped off, he was in his element. His first play was explosive, a steal, followed by a coast-to-coast fast break and a smooth layup. The crowd murmured in approval. Then came the three-pointers, the quick crossovers, the precision passes that left defenders scrambling. Jaden was everywhere, controlling the game like a seasoned pro. The more he played, the louder the buzz grew. He's got serious potential. This kid is a future NBA talent. Where did he come from? By the time the game ended, Jaden had put up an electrifying performance. As he walked off the court, a scout from a top college program approached him. "We need to talk," the scout said, handing him a business card. Jaden's fingers tightened around the card. He had arrived. Offers poured in. Colleges wanted him. Recruiters called nonstop. Jaden sat down with his parents and Coach Williams to make the biggest decision of his life.